As gardeners, we all welcome the opportunity occasionally to peek over each other's fences and see what's going on in our neighbor's backyard. Well, this year, on the weekend of April 11th and 12th, you'll have an opportunity to go on the Tulsa Garden Club's annual garden tour. There are 4 homes that were selected a year ago for their unique landscape features. Today, we just want to give you a taste of what those backyards look like, and maybe you can get some ideas for your own home landscape. Our first stop on the tour is the backyard of Mr. and Mrs. Robert E. Norman. They back up to Crow Creek here in central Tulsa and have taken advantage of their 2-level backyard. It slopes very steeply down to Crow Creek, and so at any point you're standing in the yard, you can't see all of it at once. So it's full of lots of natural surprises. Now behind me is a grove of native dogwoods. Mrs. Norman has trunked those up over the years and planted many different kinds of ground covers underneath. And I think you can get some unique ideas from that on how to handle very shady areas. Now these dogwoods are absolutely in their element here because they're under some very tall oak trees that have been trunked up, so they have dappled shade and a moist environment in which to live, and they're doing beautifully. The Normans have also planted extensive plantings of azaleas and Japanese maples, and those maples give color for a long period of time early in the year because when their foliage first comes out, it's a deep burgundy red, so it's a nice contrast in looking down through the woods. They also have applied a unique way of growing wing-tipped euonymus. They've trunked them up in a more formal setting in undulating groupings of 3s and 5s, and in addition have lighted them with the lights facing up for drama at nighttime. Behind me is a row of boxwoods planted in a hedge, and Mrs. Norman wanted to leave these for the tour because it shows the damage that was done last November. You may be noticing on some of your broadleaf plants that the foliage was burned back by the freeze early last November. The good news is that these are growing out of it just fine. One final unique feature in this backyard is the use of Anthony water or spirea. Now normally you think about using spirea in a flower bed border and you stand up tall and have to bend down to see the beautiful pink flowers that appear all summer long. This comes up to greet you as you walk up the rock pathway from the lower level back up to the upper level of the house. And I think this is a lesson that you could learn if your own backyard has a steep angle to it. Here at Mr. and Mrs. Joe Klein's home, they added some angled parking to accommodate their guests. And to soften the lines of those parking places, they filled in with monkey grass, boxwoods, dwarf nandinas, and azaleas. And then to complement the stonework in their home, they've used many, many large boulders that are covered with lichens, and it adds a very natural appearance to this setting. Beginning with an L-shaped backyard, the Kleins have divided it up into intimate little areas, such as this spot back here next to their jacuzzi that looks like the front porch of a small cottage. As you walk through the rose garden and amble through here, they've used many more stones and boulders to soften up the effects. And then on this pathway, they've not only used flat stones, but they've mixed it in with concrete to soften that and give it an aged appearance. On down through the yard, around their swimming pool, they've used many, many more boulders and filled in with azaleas and many different kinds of ground covers. Basically, their backyard is very sunny, and they've been able to use dogwoods and redbuds under a few trees and fill in the back with a crabapple tree that has a very intimate little setting with a goldfish pond down underneath. And then out in the sunny areas, Mrs. Klein has filled in with many, many perennial flowers. And this is a yard that, even though it started out as very blocky in shape, it has small rooms to it, if you will. And many landscapers encourage people as they plan a backyard to think of it as an outdoor room or a series of rooms. And I think that's what has been achieved here, and you'll really enjoy some of the different features of their backyard. Here's a more whimsical feature of this backyard landscape. Mrs. Klein over the past 4 years has been collecting birdhouses as she travels throughout the country. There are many, many different kinds, and she tells us that the birds actually roost in them during the summertime. We think that this also adds a very personal touch to this beautiful home landscape. We're now at a high point in South Tulsa where you can see all the way to downtown, the beautiful view of the skyline. We're in the backyard of Mr. and Mrs. Ron Wilson, and their landscape is at a high point, but it drops off dramatically. There's a steep grade change, and they've done quite a bit to treat this grade change very gently to avoid erosion, and have done a lot of natural plantings in among the rocks. Now, in their whole landscape, one key color feature is the use of blue and yellow. They have blue and yellow pansies in bloom right now, and that complements the TU colors of blue and gold. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson are both graduates of TU, and they always have the hurricane flag flying, which can easily be seen from 61st Street. Leading off from their backyard patio area, they've put in a row of forsythia that are in bloom right now and just beautiful. And it's a natural division between the top part of their yard and the descent down to the bottom. Now, they've worked in a lot of creeping phlox, which can take a hot, dry area, because this is a west-facing slope, and so they needed to be particular about selecting plants that would survive well on a rocky surface such as this. There are also strawberry plants worked in, which make a beautiful ground cover and are also very serviceable. This is cotoneaster. Some people also call it rock spray. In the fall and winter, it has red berries, and the Wilsons are avid bird watchers, bird feeders, and they also like to attract squirrels to the yard as well. They love to watch wildlife. Working on down here, they have some daffodils that have just passed their prime, some more phlox, and then around the corner here is one of the many types of sedums that are planted in among the rocks. Now, sedum is very heat and drought tolerant and will spread rapidly to fill in. This one right here is called dragon's blood sedum, and it looks just beautiful nestled in among the rocks. Further up, they have some light green sedums that also look very good in among this planting. As we leave the Wilsons' home, I don't want you to miss this last architectural element that helps divide their front garden into two distinct spaces. After the driveway was in place, their landscape designer realized that with all that sweeping span of concrete, they needed something to divide the space up and soften the appearance of the concrete, with the garage being in front like it is. And so they put in this fence, and it's become a handy tool for landscaping around the front yard, because in front they've put some low-growing junipers, some dwarf yopon holly, an additional yopon holly here, and then on the back side they've done an extensive planting of dwarf nandinas and some seasonal color. So this is something you might want to remember for your own front yard. Well, we're at our last stop here in the far south end of Tulsa County at the home of Dr. Anthony Billings. And as you enter this backyard, you're going to get a very peaceful, cool, calm feel. It's a very shady backyard, and it echoes the elements of Dr. Billings' hobby, which is bonsai. As you'll notice, he has extensive use of ground covers. One of them is sedum, and from a distance it resembles the moss that dresses out the base of his bonsai trees. He also has extensive use of broadleaf evergreens such as mahonia, viburnum, and azaleas and rhododendrons. I also want you to notice, if you come here to visit, that he has used a combination of mulches which contrast with each other. Not only has he used the shredded cedar mulch, but he's used pine bark mulch, crushed gravel, and you couple that with the sedum ground covers, and it's a beautiful combination. And as you leave, don't forget to see his extensive bonsai collection. It's worth your while. Well, I hope you've enjoyed just this very brief glimpse of the gardens that you'll see if you go on the Tulsa Garden Tour this year. Now, the way to get tickets for the garden tour is in advance. You can go to the Tulsa Garden Center at 25th and Peoria and purchase tickets for $5 per person in advance. Children under 12, of course, can attend for free. Your ticket is actually your brochure into the garden tour, and it gives you a map of how to get to each house and a description ahead of time of what you'll see, which is very helpful in planning your time. If you need more details on the Tulsa Garden Club's garden tour, all the major nurseries in Tulsa have posters such as these on display, and at their checkout counters they have the smaller yellow posters, and they have these tear-off sheets that you can put in with your plants when you buy them to give you details on where to buy your tickets ahead of time and where the different houses are going to be. If you don't make it to the garden center in advance, you could go to any of these houses next Saturday between 10 and 6 or next Sunday between 12 and 6 and buy your tickets on site. And On-site tickets are $6 per person. Well, I hope you're able to make it on the tour. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.